Hi everybody, it's me again. I thought I would try to do chapter 6 while you watched in case this is useful. Here we go. We're going to see how it goes. So we're going to start with Rails new, depot, which of course is going to create the subdirectory called depot with all the bits of the standard Rails stuff in it, right? We're going to wait for it to finish. And there it is. And now of course we do cd to depot to go into the directory where we find all the bits. I won't go into them, but we've looked at them many times. Now, in this example, we're using the scaffolding capability, generating scaffolds. And a scaffold in Rails, kind of like the intuitive meaning of it, is a way to quickly build an infrastructure for an application. Now, it turns out that in real life, you don't often use these scaffolds. But they're a really good way to get going. So there's no harm in using them, but expect that as you go along, you'll find that it's putting in code you don't necessarily want. So the command is Rails generate scaffold, capital product, which means I'm going to create a model for the products. By using a scaffold, it's not going to create the model only, but it's going to create a few, and the routes. It's going to do a lot of stuff for you for free. I have to give it the data types that are involved, so it's a string title for a product, a description, which is text, which is generally just a longer string, and an image URL, which is also a string. And finally, a price, which is decimal. And we will go over in class the list of available data types. These data types correspond to what Active Record offers. And as we discussed in class, basically Active Record takes responsibility for moving those particular data types onto whatever the actual database is that's being used. So I'm going to create the scaffold. Hopefully I don't have any typos. Here we go. And it creates a bunch of files. Okay? Now, it literally says that in the book. Now, one of the very important files that are created is called the migration. We'll cover that in class as well. But let me just quickly show you what the migration looks like. We're going to cd to the database directory, and there's a migration subdirectory. And if I do a directory here, we see one file created. If I type that file out, that magic number, by the way, is a timestamp. Don't worry about it. Here it is, and you can see here that it's creating, it has a specification essentially for what the database will look like. And we'll talk in class why this is a good approach to take and why Rails does this. But basically, what has not happened yet is a database has not been created yet, and no tables have been filled in. All that's happened is this kind of instruction file called a migration, which has the capability of being applied to the database. And the way you do that is by doing this magic command called rake db migrate. So let me just type it in. Now that's something new you've seen as well. So as I go through explaining the magic, rake is a command line utility that comes with Rails, actually comes with Ruby, and it's kind of like make for Ruby, rake. And it lets you, just like make works in many other languages like C and C++, in Java, last time I checked, they use something called Ant. That might have changed, but it's a developer tool that allows you to automate the building and management of your files. So essentially, when I say rake db migrate, what it says is look at whatever migration files have not been applied yet and apply it to the database. In class, I will cover the list of other rake commands that are interesting, but for now, I'll just move on. Now, interestingly enough, because I have created this with a scaffold, we already have a bit of an application. So if I run the Rails server now, you see basically it says that the Rails application is running, and this is the URL. So if I grab my browser and I shrink it down so we can look at it together, and like this, and I type the indicated URL, we see here a couple of things happen which I was not expecting. One of them is I'm seeing the welcome aboard page, and the reason for that is that I mistakenly typed in the URL without a path, so I'm going to the home path, and because we've not done anything special, the home path in Rails always displays this silly page. So what we're going to do is we're going to add the path that's actually requested, which is the products page, right? And if I hit enter now, I magically see the list of all the products that exist, and of course no product exists, so it's an empty list, and there's a link, the new product link. Now this is a view we're looking at, and normally, as we talked in class, you were creating your own views, but in this case, I'm creating, rather the scaffolding generator created the views. If I ask to create a new product, I'm clicking on this link. You notice that the URL has changed, and I can put in the title of the product. First product is going to be an apple time capsule, because I just got one. Time capsule is great. Foo bar. Notice that it's going to accept this, even though foo and bar are not proper image URLs. Rather, foo is not a proper image URL, but bar seems to have been converted. Seems to have been converted into text. Yeah, so as you can see, I'm looking here at a form for the product that I just created, and a lot of things come for free. I hit edit, and it goes back into the edit mode. I can put an exclamation point in, update the product. This is not fake. This is all doing the whole Rails procedure with controllers and views and so on and so forth. Now, let's go on to take a look at the next thing that they suggest you do. The next thing they suggest you do is to modify one of the views, one of the many views that the scaffold created. Okay, so let's do that. I'm going to go back to my shell. I'm going to go to the directory I was working in. I'm going to look at what the new directories are. I'm going to go to cd depot, and I'm going to run my Sublime editor, and I'm going to shrink it so you can see it. Like so, and like so, okay. And I'm going to open the app directory. I'm going to open the views directory. I'm going to go open the products directory, which was created by the scaffolding, right? And in there we're going to find the underscore form view. And there's a lot of stuff in here which you will learn about as we go along. But if you think about our discussion about ERBs the other day, you'll see a lot of these percent equals businesses, and then you see some stuff that looks like HTML. So essentially this is a view, it's a template which gets expanded during view rendering to expand things like percent equals form 4. But the small thing we're going to do is simply add, under the text area here, over here, we're going to add an additional parameter which is going to say to ask rows being 6. And that's a parameter, essentially, if you want to think about it, to the text area method on the F object. And the F object was created as a result of all the way up here, this form 4 do. Okay, so I can save the file, and I can go back to my server, and I can hit edit, and now it's bigger. To prove my point, or to prove it for myself as well as for you, I'm going to change the 6 to something really dramatic, like 20, and go back here and refresh, and there it is. So that proves that in fact the HTML generated by that's being displayed here was generated by that view. Okay? So that's it. Now if I put a very long, and I think it works great, and I save this, you see there that it's displayed in the view in a very nice way. And if you want to go study the HTML that was generated, I'll leave that to you. Okay, continuing on the demo, we're going to make things prettier. I'm now on page 85. So what we're going to do is we're going to now add some data into the database. We refer to this sometimes as seed data because we're seeding the database with some data instead of typing it in by hand. Now I'm going to show you how the book does it, and then I'm going to give you some thoughts, which is that there are many different ways of seeding the database, and there's many different reasons why you might seed the database. If you think about it, when this depot is operational, the records of the database are all going to correspond to real users who have been using, the website to order stuff. The seed data is fake, and sometimes seed data might be, for example, a table of zip codes, or it might be data that might be used for testing, or it might be data that is required to calculate taxes, things like that. And there are numerous ways of creating seed data. One of the easiest is by modifying this file called seeds.rb. Seeds.rb, like everything here, is just a Ruby file. It just follows a very particular set of conventions, okay? So I'm going to grab this file. Actually, instead of grabbing the file from the book, I'm going to go off script a little bit, and I'm going to follow this model. Now, you will not necessarily recognize what I'm doing here because it covers uses of active record that you have not seen yet, but still it might be interesting to see something a little bit different from what the book shows, and then I'll do what the book shows as well. So essentially I'm going to issue Rails commands, so this is just regular Ruby on Rails commands, and I'm going to create a title in my seed data called Peto's textbook, and I'm going to give it a description, and yeah, let's just paste it from before. I'm not going to give it an image URL, but I am going to give it a price of $900 because it's a really excellent book. Okay, and I'm going to stop there. If you can tell, this is a legitimate and not a very unusual Ruby statement. The class is called product, and it takes three parameters, three arguments rather: title, description, price. Okay. Now I'm going to come back and do what the book says in a minute, but for now, let's go off script. I'm going to go back to the terminal. I'm in Depot, and I'm going to issue the command rake db seed, which basically says read that seed file and create records in the database accordingly. So if I did my syntax correctly, it seems to have worked very nicely. So if I now go back to my running server, my running Rails server, as follows, and I refresh the page, I will see that now, if you remember from before, there was the book, the title that I typed in here, and here's the title that came out of seed data. And even if I delete all the records in this database and recreate the database and then ask it to load up the seed data, I'm going to get this. Okay? Good. Now, the reason I did that is to show you the essence of what we're doing here, but I want to go back and just catch up with what the book is saying to do. Okay? So the book is saying to paste this long piece of text in here, which I will now do, and I will explain to you what this is briefly, superficially maybe. Basically, we have a bunch of records that look a lot like the one I typed in before. They're preceded by a delete all, start over, then it creates title, description. The description string is multi-line and uses a notation that looks like HTML. Image URL is an actual URL, price, and so on, and it goes on. So if I save this file, and I go back to my command prompt, and I do dbseed again, now it should be loading in the information that came out of that new seed file. So I can go back to my browser, and I'll refresh it. And now I see the three books that actually were indicated before. Notice that it says angle bracket P is not displaying it in a pretty way, probably because it doesn't know yet that it's supposed to interpret that as HTML. But now we're caught up with the book. Okay? Continuing. One way to make this pretty, of course, is to add CSS. So that's what we're going to do now. That's going to be a big cheat because they're not even going to explain to you how they do it. But here's the CSS that they want you to put in. And by the way, I agree with you now that it would be pointless to type all this stuff in. And now I will go back to my source files, and I will put it into, oops, sorry, rather my source files, and I will put it into the apps, assets, style sheets, and there is a product.css that's blank. It was created by the scaffolding. We're going to get rid of that and paste in the style, the CSS. Now, if you don't know CSS, this is real gibberish, and we're going to be covering that. But basically, this is giving style information. So if I return now to my page with Depot and I refresh it again, well, nothing happens. I wonder why that is. Possibly I have to restart the server. Because in this, and by the way, that's not a bad thing to think about. Let me just read it, the instructions. Well, let me just try to do it here. Here we go. I'm going to go to my command line. I'm going to go to my server, kill it, start it again. It may be that, that it has to rebuild the CSS. And I refresh now, and it still looks like hell. Okay. Well, I don't know exactly what's wrong, but I will not worry about it just yet. But notice that we do have these nice commands over here. Right. Let me just pause a second. I think I want to show you myself troubleshooting this, because that might be useful. So this is the products.css.scss that's living in the style sheet slash asset slash style sheet directory. This, many of these rules here ought to have been making the appearance of the page nicer. So continuing our spelunking, I'm going to look at the HTML page as rendered. I'm going to refresh it. Does not improve it. Now, my first theory is maybe there's a cache that has to be refreshed. So I'm using the secret develop menu that you can enable on Safari as well as on Chrome to force it to empty the cache. I just did that. I'm going to refresh now, and I see no difference. So that was not the problem. Next, I'm going to examine the HTML that is being generated by hitting this I to look at it. And I will notice, for example, that we have a listing of products, we have a table. Nothing seems to have any style sheets on it, which is interesting. I would have thought that it would have rather classes, which is just vanilla tables, which makes me wonder about how this exactly is meant to work. I'm going to go back and look at the style sheets now and see whether they rely on that. And for example, let me find something that's going to be very obvious. The font weight on a list description, definition, DLDD, list actions, font size small. I'm going to put something in here. It's a good place to maybe put, because it looks like it's not even picking up list actions. Now I'm going to do this a few more minutes in front of you, then I'm going to stop because it's going to get really boring, and I'll fix it on my own. But if I look here, yeah, I'm going to go offline and fix it and then come back and explain to you what I found. Okay, welcome back, everybody. I think I figured it out, but I'll watch me try to fix it. So it turns out that I looked at the screen, look at the generated view too early. In particular, I did not update the layouts application.html, which basically this file here is the file that gets applied to every single page that gets generated. And the most important thing that was needed was this. And I'll just type it in. And again, this is a little bit of magic, so this could go on your list of things that you did not understand. But we need to annotate all the HTML in here with the class that says what it is. So I'm going to say class equals percent equals, and I'm going to simply use that as the class name. Close the angle bracket. So this stuff gets substituted by Rails into a piece of text, which is the name, actually the name of the controller. And I think that should do it. And now if I go over here, magically I get an error. All right, so it now is complaining that I say controller name, and it looks like I have a typo, because it's not controller.name, it's controller underscore name. And now we have another small problem in that the name is not matching. And I can refer back to the generated HTML for fun. I will go here again. And now I should say class equals products, which is what I expected. So now everything should be working. And the reason it's not working, I'm going to try my previous two guesses, which was caching. So I'm going to erase the cache, refresh. See, that helps. That does not help. I'm going to stop the server and restart it. And see if that helps. And here it is. So it turned out that what was missing was that I had skipped again and not updated index.html, which we will learn more about, but basically that's the view that corresponds to this index page, which is the list of products. These little gadgets here, the little question marks, are because I did not bother downloading the images as the instructions require. Okay. Let me just walk through some of the trickery that's in this file, even though we'll get to it in more detail tomorrow or next class. But how do we get the alternating pink and white colors? Well, if you look closely, you will find here, this line here, that this tr, which is table row HTML command, has a class which says what kind of styling it needs. The class is generated by %equals, as we've learned before, and a call to cycle. And cycle basically means alternate this with this, this with this. So it's basically putting every other line of the report with a different class, and that gives it a different colors. The next thing I want to show you is the truncate helper, and that I just misplaced it. It's right here. Okay, and it just makes sure that the description is not too long. Now the interesting thing is that before that, it calling strip tags, and the reason it's doing this is, if you remember, when in the seed data we put in the product description with the various angle bracket P's to make paragraphs in case they were displayed elsewhere. But when they're displayed in this list of products, i.e. in this display, obviously we don't want more than 80 characters of description. That's this sentence here, okay? And so that strip first removes the HTML tags and truncate limits it to 80. And the third interesting thing is this destroy line. Now we see here %equal link to, which is creating a URL. We'll learn about that. It's one of the primitives within the Vue language, essentially. And it says label the link with the word destroy, give it these parameters so that if it's clicked, the record is actually destroyed, and finally give it a confirm string. So again here, some very convenient shortcuts within Rails. Okay, let's continue. Oh, actually, that's kind of the end of it. So we went a little bit longer because I got stuck on that one problem, and I got stuck again, just to remind you, because I decided to jump ahead and not really. I decided to look at what the view looked like before I finished putting in the changes. And we could talk about this some more tomorrow. But to remind you, the 3 changes that were needed to get the whole scheme to work was, the first change we had to make was where we added data with seeds.rb. Then we modified the products.css.scss file living inside of the assets, which gave us the styling for the whole site. Next, we have to modify application.html.erb, which is a styling a bit of HTML that's applied to every single page that's generated by the server, and we have to tell it to style them all as products. And that was done by this line here. Let me quickly find it for you. It's in, let me see, application.html. It's in this file. All we did there was this line here, which is basically a body tag, which is HTML with a class being computed by the controller name. The controller in this case is product, so the class would be product, and that would tie right in with the fact that this whole set of style, CSS styling, it relates to products. Okay, the final steps in this particular exercise reviews what happened, and then suggests a couple of changes that you can make. But I'll leave it at this, and I hope you find this useful. And I hope the audio is good, and I hope it all makes sense, at least at its first level. And remember to make some notes on one or two things that you found particularly confusing, and we can make sure to find the common ones and review them tomorrow in class. Okay? Enjoy. Bye-bye.